During my sophomore year of college, I was your typical nerd, obsessed with math and totally oblivious to the social scene. My world was quiet study corners in the library, far from the buzz of campus life, buried in equations and theorems. I wasn't unattractive, but I figured my intense focus on academics left no space for romance. One night, reluctantly dragged to a party, I sat by myself nursing a beer, feeling like I didn't belong. That's when Lena walked over. Yes, that Lena, the campus queen, and my silent obsession. She was breathtaking, the kind of woman who made heads turn without trying. But that night, she chose to talk to me. We clicked instantly, and not long after graduation, we got married. "Oh, Evan, you're still one of a kind," she said with that sugary charm. While flattering on the surface, her words dug at me. After nearly 30 years of marriage, why was she comparing me to other men? The question hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. We were in what should have been a tender moment, but her comment threw me. "You always know how to shake up my world," she added, as I lay on her thigh, unmoving. "Aren't you going to keep going?" she asked. "No, I'm spent," I replied. "You took all my energy." She kissed me, then turned over and quickly fell asleep. Usually, we'd cuddle, maybe talk. That night, she was out cold. I cleaned up, went downstairs, and poured a drink. A high IQ can be more curse than blessing, where most men might dismiss her words. I couldn't. With a glass of Staley's rye in hand, I mentally reviewed our marriage. Everything seemed fine. In fact, our sex life had improved since our youngest left for college. Lena had lost 20 pounds and was nearly back to her college figure, about 120 pounds. At 51, Lena still had a jaw-dropping body, toned legs, perfect curves, and the same stunning face she inherited from her mother. Time hadn't dulled her looks. We'd met in college, dated for 2 years, and married at 22. Lena had always been a flirt. I used to find it harmless. Now, not so much. She assumed her looks could sway any man, and she wasn't wrong. That confidence never bothered me before, but it felt different now. She had a way of commanding attention. Once, at work, she derailed a serious conversation just by walking in. It was irritating and funny at the same time. She'd been turning heads since she was 14. Even when she put on 20 pounds, she still looked amazing. She called Tessa, a 26-year-old coworker, a friend, but the kind you don't trust. When Tessa made a crack about Lena's cheesecake bum, Lena didn't forget. Zach, the new agent at work, was 6'4", built like a Greek statue, and devastatingly handsome. Lena noticed, and while she told herself she was happily married, she wasn't fooling me. She skipped lunch with her usual crew and drove straight to the gym near her office to sign up. "Miss Cheeseback's gonna pay," she muttered as she pulled out of the lot. Back at home, on my third whiskey, I found myself drifting to memories of our first meeting. I was a shy, bookish gym rat. She was a goddess. Goddesses don't date geeks, or so I believed. I admired her from afar, never daring to get close. She was always surrounded by confident, good-looking guys. Then, at a party one night, I was deep in thought with a beer when someone sat next to me. It was her, the girl I thought I'd never even speak to. "So, are you gay or bi?" she asked, blunt as ever. "No offense, I just figured you'd have hit on me by now if you weren't." I blushed, stammered, totally caught off guard. Up close, she was even more stunning. "And yeah," I reacted. "Oh, so that's how it is," she said, smirking. No judgment. I managed to croak. "I'm straight. Just didn't think you'd be interested in someone like me." She shrugged. "You don't exactly put yourself out there. Some of us like mystery." We left the party together and ended up married shortly after. I always knew she was socially out of my league, but I had one edge. I knew how to please her. That first night, I turned her into a breathless mess, and I still can. Lately, though, she hasn't seemed interested. Tonight had been different. 2 full weeks without sex, the longest since our kids were born. She always had a reason. Tired, stressed, not in the mood. Eventually, I stopped initiating. That evening, while she washed a pan at the sink, I came up behind her, touched her gently. She half resisted but didn't stop me. I guided her upstairs, undressed her quickly. Usually, she'd lose herself in the moment, moaning incoherently. But this time, she wouldn't stop talking. Her hell yes was supposed to be hot, but the things she said about my skills threw me off. It felt off, calculated, like she was trying to convince herself, or me. 2 weeks after that weird breakroom moment, Lena kicked off her slow seduction of Zach Harper. They had a work project, perfect excuse to invite him over. It seemed professional enough on paper. She was the senior agent, after all. But this time, she made sure Tessa heard about the dinner. She handled the business stuff first. A deal's a deal, she always said, then shifted into flirt mode. Over wine, she asked about Zach's football past, dug into his personal life. He mentioned a girlfriend, but said they weren't exclusive. All through dinner, she gently touched his arm, her blazer open just enough to show a tight white top. She leaned forward again and again, catching his gaze. He was hooked. Men are so easy, she thought. He's already mine. Just doesn't know it yet. A few more pounds off, and I'll give him his reward. Hiring the private investigator instead of booking a Hawaii vacation? Best money I ever spent. The private investigator's report confirmed my worst fears. Lena wasn't just sleeping with Zach Harper. She was also hooking up with Miles Avery and her gym trainer. As he handed me the folder, the investigator looked uneasy, and for a moment, I wondered if he was tangled up with her too. Nothing about Lena shocked me anymore. I've never been a complete loner. Over the years, I built a solid circle of friends. One of the closest is Julian Cray, a sharp attorney with a geeky streak like mine. He's not the type to break pencils in rage, but in court, he's fierce. When I showed him the report, he didn't flinch. She has to face consequences, he said. Thankfully, we didn't live in a no-fault divorce state. There was no reason to let her hide behind irreconcilable differences. Not after that. Miles Avery had started as a one-time revenge move. Tessa, Lena's coworker, had insulted her, something about cheesecake thighs. Lena wanted to prove a point. Sleeping with Tessa's fiancé was her twisted way of showing off. But one night with Miles, 9 inches and skilled, changed her plans. She kept coming back, lying to Zach and me just to be with him. Then there was Logan, her personal trainer. That wasn't planned. His hands lingered on her shoulders during a session, and instead of backing off, she leaned in. Soon they were in his apartment, undressing each other like teenagers. No hesitation. No guilt. She got home late, still in her gym clothes. 5 minutes later, I walked in. She mumbled something about washing off sweat, skipped our usual hug, and started dinner like nothing happened. If I didn't have the PI's report, I might have believed her. I didn't react. I stayed calm. Later, while she cleaned up and I watched TV, the doorbell rang. She called for me to answer it. I told her to get it. Laughing, she opened the door and came back holding a manila envelope. Her face changed as she opened it. What the hell is this? She snapped. How could you do this to me? What about our family? You're just mad I beat you to it, I said quietly. Let's not pretend you wouldn't have done the same. You think I don't love you? She asked, venom in her tone. I think you cheated, I replied. I know about the affairs. She went from shocked to furious. Say it. Go ahead. Zach Harper. Miles Avery. I paused, pulling out a note. And Logan Vance. She looked like she'd been slapped. Her knees gave out a little, and she sat down hard on the couch. If you were more of a man, we wouldn't be here, she hissed. I sighed. 29 years, and this is what I get? Those guys weren't even around when we got married. Her eyes widened clearly. She hadn't realized how much I knew. She wanted to lash out but stopped herself. I'll let you stay until we sell the house, she said. No, I replied. You can explain this to the kids and your parents. I'm done covering for you. Then I stood, rolled out 2 packed suitcases from the hallway closet, and watched the surprise hit her. I'll be back for the rest later, I told her. Call Julian. Hire someone. Decide what you want. But we both know this is over. Something crashed against the wall as I walked out. I didn't bother to check what. Truth is, Lena had planned to leave eventually. But she wanted to control the narrative, to paint me as cold, distant, and boring. She thought our friends would side with her, and with the kids, she planned to attack my masculinity, spinning her betrayal into some twisted need for fulfilling intimacy. But I got ahead of her. She didn't realize she'd been feeding me clues. Every careless slip, every smug smirk. She was the leak, not anyone else. When she eventually served me her own divorce papers, trying to regain control, I handled it calmly. No begging. No scenes. That shook her. I checked into a modest motel nearby and exhaled for the first time in months. I wasn't devastated. I was relieved. But she still fought on one point, the divorce reason. She wanted irreconcilable differences instead of infidelity. Even though she was getting half of everything, it wasn't about the money. It was about saving face. She wanted to lie to the kids, to her parents, to herself. But I wasn't playing along. There's no reason to make this public, she yelled during one call. Change it, and I'll sign. Lena, I said, I may be socially awkward, but I'm not stupid. I see what you're doing. You're humiliating me. No, I corrected. You did that when you slept with other men while still married. Her next move was to smear me. Rumors started, whispers that I was bad in bed. I didn't hear it from her, of course. Friends told me, saying their wives had heard it from Lena. She assumed I'd fold to avoid embarrassment. She was wrong. The hardest hit came from Claire, our youngest. Dad, are you stalking Mom? She asked tearfully. Just to feel better? That broke me. If your mom wants to play dirty, fine, I said. But let's get the facts straight. She might have told you about one affair. Did she mention there are 3? I held up 3 fingers. 3 guys. And all of them are barely older than you. I'm not young anymore. But I'm not the one sleeping with guys who should be dating you, Claire. She froze. Her lips trembled. Then she burst into tears, right there in our kitchen. I'd never spoken to Claire so sharply, never said anything critical about Lena in front of her. She left my apartment looking shaken, confused, like her world had tilted. It took every ounce of self-control not to stop her, not to pull her in for a hug and make it all okay. 20 minutes later, the phone rang. It was Lena's mother, Eileen. We hadn't spoken since I filed for divorce, though we used to be close. After my dad passed, she'd stepped into that role with warmth and grace. What the hell is wrong with you? She screamed the moment I picked up. How could you say such horrible things to my granddaughter, you idiot? She's in tears on my couch right now. She used to adore you. Eileen continued, her voice cracking. Now she's crying, saying you insulted Lena in the worst way. What did you say to her? Eileen, please, I said, keeping my voice even. You're hearing just one side. Lena's not innocent. She's been sleeping with 3 different guys. If you don't believe me, I have proof. Silence. Then a shaky gasp. Oh my God, Evan. Do you have pictures? Videos? Yes, I replied softly. I didn't want to go that far. But Lena pushed me to it. No. Eileen whispered, horrified. That won't be necessary. I'll talk to her. 3 men. I'm so sorry, Evan. She hung up quietly. I sat there, staring at the phone. Eileen had been like a mother to me. Losing that connection hurt. But what really cut deep was having to break her heart with the truth. The divorce was finalized a year later, on the grounds of infidelity. I stopped keeping tabs on Lena after that. For all I knew, she was still rotating between Zach, Miles, and Logan. That wasn't my concern anymore. Life got interesting. A month after I filed, 2 women from the university's science department stopped by my office. I barely knew them, but they'd heard and wanted to check in. Both were attractive. One a divorced professor in her 50s, the other a widowed research assistant in her 40s. Their kindness surprised me. Over the next few weeks, more women visited or stopped me in the hall. Then one day, as I was heading out, Elise, the admin secretary for the math department, flashed me a smile that made me pause. Okay, Elise, spill it. Did I win the lottery? You seriously don't know, do you? She asked, amused. Elise was 35, curvy, with piercing green eyes and flowing raven black hair. I suddenly realized how stunning she was. She gestured to her bare ring finger. It's your weight loss, Evan. You dropped 120 pounds. Not physically, emotionally. You were always nice, but taken. Now, it's hunting season. Hunting season? I laughed, unsure if she was serious. Good guys like you? Rare. Smart, kind, stable, and single. Word got out. People saw the divorce papers. News travels fast around here. It's not finalized yet, I said. Still a few months to go. Well, she grinned. Everyone just wants you to know. They're watching. Including me. I'm submitting my application to Dr. Callahan. Sure. I'll put it in the queue. Really? She said with a wink. You're such a charmer. Lena assumed I'd keep quiet about the divorce. But within 2 weeks, the truth had spread like wildfire. The gossip didn't slow until the judge signed the papers a year later. About a month after I filed, Lena's best friend, Gina Pelletier, finally called her. Lena, are you out of your mind? She asked. How could you let the sweetest guy on earth leave you? Lena panicked. How did she already know? Gina lived 2 hours away. Surely she had time before news reached her. But someone had leaked it. Probably Eileen. It's complicated, Lena started, scrambling for a version of the truth that might sound sympathetic. I heard from Mom, Gina cut in. She had a breakdown in Walmart. Said you cheated on Evan with multiple guys. She cried right there in the cereal aisle. Eileen had been Mom to Gina since childhood. And now, she'd spilled everything. You threw away a good man because he got older? Gina snapped. Newsflash, you're getting older too. You think you deserve better? Have you looked in a mirror lately? Lena stammered, caught off guard. I always knew you had a selfish streak, Gina said, but I never thought you'd let Evan see it. The day the divorce was finalized, I sat in my small apartment with a sad-looking salad and a bottle of Buffalo Trace. Half gone before dinner ended. Lena? She was out with Zach. Fancy dinner. Then back to his place. They'd replayed this scene plenty of times. But something felt different now. Her body didn't respond like it used to. Her head wasn't in it. Afterward, she gently removed Zach's hands, got dressed, and left. Alone in her car, she sat for a long moment. Her first official night as a divorced woman had been a failure. A realization was sinking in, but she wasn't ready to face it. 2 weeks later, I had dinner with Nora Greer, a longtime friend of both Lena and me. It was my first actual date. I have a genius IQ, I told her over pasta. I can crack passwords in my head, read 4 books at once. But I still don't understand women. Nora chuckled. At least you're honest. I chose her for a reason. She was safe, familiar. No pressure, no games. Just dinner with someone who'd known me for decades. I thought I had you ladies figured out, I said. Turns out, I was clueless for 30 years. So now what? Nora leaned in slightly. She was a year or 2 younger than me, flexible from yoga, and graceful. Her skin was smooth, her eyes a striking blue. I started thinking about her in ways I never had before. I hoped you'd call someday, she said. Didn't expect to be first in line, but I'm honored. Then she added, let's not waste tonight talking about Lena. Let's just see where this goes. Agreed, I nodded. Hard to move forward if you keep looking back. I leaned in and kissed her gently. She responded by nearly swallowing my face. I gasped when she finally let go. Until that night, I'd never imagined Nora in a romantic way. Sure, I noticed her beauty, appreciated her figure, but while I was married, I didn't lust after other women. Because back then, I was still committed. And secondly, why would I even look at another woman when I was married to a goddess? Lena's looks had always turned heads. For most of our marriage, I honestly believed I was the luckiest guy alive. I've been out of the dating game for decades, and it showed. I was awkward, unsure. My face stayed flushed the entire dinner with Nora, but I did my best to relax and hold a decent conversation. I think I managed. After dessert, cheesecake and coffee, Nora locked eyes with me and said, I think we should go back to my house. I have something stronger than coffee for a nightcap. And if I'm not mistaken, you haven't been with anyone since Lena. She was right. I hadn't. Then she added, I'd like to be the first. After the queen. That hit me in a way I didn't expect. I was scared. Not just nervous, scared. It had been a long time. I wasn't 21 anymore, and I knew I wouldn't last long. The thought of failing with Nora, someone both Lena and I knew, made me sweat. I could already hear the whispers. Dr. Evan Callahan, computational physics genius, a complete dud in bed. It would validate everything Lena said, wouldn't it? At her place, Nora made more coffee while I tried to keep my breathing steady. She excused herself to change. I was barely holding it together. Then she returned. She wore a terry robe that looked like it had been designed more for seduction than comfort. It clung to her curves and barely reached mid-thigh. Through the fabric, I could see she'd removed her bra. Her figure left nothing to the imagination. I was very much interested. We sat close on her couch, sipping coffee and making small talk. I tried not to stare, tried not to drool. But my mind was buzzing. Evan, she said gently, breaking through the fog. You okay? Before I could answer, she took the mug from my hands, set it down, and stood up. No words, she just reached for my hand and led me to the bedroom. I was almost in a daze. She slowly undressed me like it was some sacred ritual. My brain finally clicked back on. Wait, slow down, I whispered. It's been a while. I don't want this to be over too quickly. Relax, Evan, she replied with a soft smile. I understand. We'll take our time. And we can always do this again. Well, I'm patient, I said, starting to undress her, but not that patient. We didn't rush. It was everything I hoped for, and everything I feared it wouldn't be. As we lay side by side afterward, both of us breathless, Nora turned and said, Did you really have to be that irresistible? I smirked. That's what I'm here for, isn't it? She laughed and curled against me, turning her back so I could wrap my arms around her. We fell asleep like that, wrapped in comfort I hadn't felt in years. I woke hours later to the sensation of Nora pressing against me from the waist down. Warm, soft, steady. Good morning, Sonia. I mumbled before realizing I was still half dreaming. Good morning to you too, she replied, eyes sparkling. You are incomparable, honey. A month passed. Nora and I continued seeing each other, quietly and without pressure. But then came the inevitable. Lena called Nora out of the blue and invited her to lunch. They met at one of their favorite spots. Nora suspected the real reason the moment she got the invite. It wasn't just to catch up. Lena had heard something, and now she wanted to confirm it. For the first 10 minutes, they exchanged pleasantries, kids, work, the usual. Then Lena leaned back, swirling her margarita. So, lots of dates lately, Nora, she purred. I thought you gave up on exercise. Nora blushed. She'd expected the question, but not the edge in Lena's voice. What had started as curiosity now felt like interrogation. And Nora wasn't sure how to lie. The truth was, things with me had become something more than a fling. I'd taken her on unforgettable dates, and our time together had been intense, mentally and physically. Is he always that good? Nora had wondered privately, still amazed. She was like a teenager discovering intimacy for the first time. Lena's eyebrows furrowed when Nora didn't brush off the question. She had assumed I wouldn't try hard with someone new. But Nora's response told a different story. How could you let that man go? Nora said, Are you crazy, little sister? Smart, handsome, kind, and a wizard in bed. Lena's smile disappeared. She took a long sip of her drink and changed the subject. Nora, sensing her discomfort, let her. No point rubbing it in. Weeks later, I was lying in bed again, this time with Sierra Langston curled against me. Her hand rested lightly on my chest, rising and falling with her breath. We'd just finished something wild. Not tender, not romantic, just intense. I was drained, sticky, and feeling like $1,000,000. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. Lena had cheated, claiming I didn't satisfy her. And yet here I was, 3 women deep since the divorce, and each encounter better than the last. I couldn't make sense of it. Sierra was a physician assistant at an orthopedic clinic. Cliché or not, we met at the gym. She was grinding away on the machines, sweat glistening, focused like an athlete. That's what drew me in. She wasn't there to show off, just to work. I normally admire and move on, but this time, I couldn't. I waited until she headed for the locker room and approached carefully. I hadn't dated much, despite all the offers. But something about Sierra stuck with me. I introduced myself and asked, as politely as I could, if she'd be interested in coffee and dessert. She hesitated, just a second, then smiled, tapped her name into my phone, and walked off. I watched her go, feeling a little stunned. Just before she left the gym, I called her back. I know this seems forward, I said. But how about Thursday? She turned, looked through the glass door, and gave me a smile that stopped my heart. Thursday it is, she said. Laszlo's. 7 o'clock. The rest of that workout? Effortless. I didn't feel a single ache. On Thursday evening, I showed up at Laszlo's a little early, 6:50 sharp. I found a quiet table tucked into the back corner and ordered a couple slices of cheesecake to get us started. I hadn't even taken my second sip of water before Sierra walked in. Her long blonde hair was tied back in a high ponytail, and she wore a pair of tight denim shorts and a snug t-shirt that stopped just short of her waistband, showing off a narrow waist and toned abs. I could tell she'd been putting in serious time at the gym, and she clearly wasn't shy about showing off the results. Her chest was modest, but everything was proportioned perfectly. She didn't need to be more. In fact, if she had been, I think she would have drawn too much attention, especially since she wasn't wearing a bra. That much was obvious the moment she walked toward me. I was seated at a high-top table, so when I stood to pull out her chair, she had to hop up slightly. The sudden bounce of her chest didn't go unnoticed by either of us. She caught me glancing and raised a brow, amused. I just smiled and nodded like a man who knew he was busted and didn't care. We spent the next 2 hours enjoying cheesecake and sipping coffee while we talked about everything and nothing. I was drawn in by her confidence, her energy, and her easy laughter. She was smart and sharp and noticeably younger than me. Not by decades, but young enough that the thought crossed my mind. Still, we hit it off, and before the night was over, she agreed to another date that Saturday. Our second date took us to an antique car museum, then a cozy dinner. After that, we ended up back at my apartment. Let's just say, the night went better than expected. Turns out, the old man still had a few tricks left. While I drifted into satisfied sleep, clear-headed and happy. Lena was across town, tangled up with a younger man she'd picked up earlier in the evening. It was rushed, mechanical. She didn't enjoy it the way she thought she would. As she dressed and slipped into her car, she sat behind the wheel and asked herself the question she couldn't ignore anymore. Shouldn't this have been more fun? She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror and liked what she saw, physically. But something inside her felt off. A month earlier, Zach had broken things off. He told her, very kindly, that he wanted something real. Marriage, kids, a future. Lena had none of that to offer. It was the second time in a row she'd been dumped. First me, now Zach. And even though she told herself she was fine, she wasn't. She had tried to justify it by convincing herself the sex with Zach had grown stale anyway. Sometimes, even she couldn't fake interest. This isn't supposed to happen to someone like me, she thought. Not to someone used to being the one doing the rejecting. As she pulled into her driveway, Lena sighed. Maybe next time, I should try dating someone closer to my age. The younger guys were hot, sure, but conversation? Connection? Lately, those seemed just as hard to find as good sex. Ironically, my time with Sierra only confirmed what I'd always suspected about Lena. Even before we were married, I'd felt that she wasn't nearly as passionate as the other women I'd been with. And deep down, I always figured it was because she didn't feel like she had to try. Women like Lena, those rare beauties who always turned heads, don't usually put in extra effort. They don't need to. Men feel lucky just being near them. And for a while, that worked. The novelty was enough. But eventually, that wears off, especially when the woman's beautiful exterior hides a self-centered, passive lover. I had hinted at it a few times, gently, but I never had the heart to tell her outright that she just wasn't very good in bed. I didn't say it, because I loved her. But then came Nora, then Holly, and now Sierra. These women had shown me what real intimacy could feel like, what it should feel like. And as I lay in bed, drifting off beside Sierra, I felt something else, frustration. Not because of them, but because Lena had fooled me again. She made me believe for years that I was the one lacking. 2 weeks later, my phone rang, and to my surprise, it was Lena. I hadn't spoken to her in months. When I was with our daughters, they didn't bring her up, and I made it clear I wouldn't, either. I wanted them to respect their mother, but they also had to respect that I was done with her. Evan, she said, Sophie wants to know if we can behave at her wedding. Luke proposed, and she wants us both there, as long as we don't act like enemies. I haven't heard from Sophie yet, I replied. But you can let her know I'll be the perfect gentleman. I'll remind her you were once the woman I loved when she calls. Sophie called the next day to tell me the news herself. I gave her the same answer and promised her I'd help with expenses. She mentioned that Lena was helping plan the wedding, and I encouraged her to enjoy it all. This was her moment, not ours. I'm not the emotional type, but walking my daughter down the aisle brought me to the edge. That tiny girl who once played with dolls and squealed over birthday cake had grown into a poised, kind, radiant woman. The aisle was short, but with each step I saw flashes of her childhood. I handed her off to Luke, and as they took each other's hands, I felt the tears roll down my cheeks. Afterward, I returned to my seat and stood beside Lena. She leaned in and kissed my cheek. Her eyes were glassy too. We danced a graceful waltz for our father-daughter number. It went smoothly. Luke and his mom followed with their mother-son foxtrot. Then the real party started. The DJ shifted into modern music, and the dance floor filled up with guests in their 20s and 30s. I stood at the bar, sipping a glass of single malt and watching the crowd. After about 10 minutes, I spotted Lena dancing with one of the younger men. They were close, too close. I walked up slowly and tapped him on the shoulder. Mind if I cut in? He hesitated, obviously unsure. But Lena smiled brightly and offered me her hand before he could say no. You don't trust me with the kids anymore? She teased. Thanks to you, half the guests think I'm a cougar. He had his hands all over you, I replied. He thought he might be leaving with the mother of the bride. And you couldn't handle that? If that's what you're into, I'll go get him back, I shrugged. But I figured you'd rather talk to someone who doesn't idolize Beyoncé. Touché, Lena said, flashing a smirk. Unless you plan to stab me on the dance floor, I'd say we've managed this weekend pretty well. I should agree, I said. But for a second there, I thought Sophie might faint when she saw me heading toward you. Lena laughed softly. Yeah, well, we haven't exactly been setting a shining example of maturity lately. No, I admitted. But at least we waited until the kids left the house before we blew up. Small victories, she replied, and for once, it didn't feel loaded with sarcasm. We shared a few more slow dances before the music picked up tempo. Her previous dance partner, a younger man in a navy suit, returned and politely asked if he could cut back in. To Lena's mild surprise, I nodded and stepped aside. I headed back to our table where Ellie was now sitting, her eyes glued to her mother swaying on the floor. Without looking away, she asked dryly, "You think I'll have to worry about guys chasing her when she's in a nursing home?" I glanced at my daughter, catching the humor in her voice but noting something deeper in her eyes, something uncertain. "Maybe," I said with a half-smile. "But what about you, Dad?" she asked, still watching the scene. "Mom says you're dating, but replacing her seems impossible." "I'm not trying to replace her," I replied. "Your mom doesn't really know much about my life these days. But let's just say, I'm not lacking attention." She nodded, and just then, Marissa Clark walked up to our table. Marissa and her late husband, Frank, had been close friends of ours for years, back when the girls were still in pigtails and birthday parties meant pony rides. Frank had passed away a few years back after a long battle with cancer. I hadn't seen much of Marissa since, mainly because she'd stayed close to Lena, and Frank had been my best friend. Marissa looked good. Better than good, actually. She wore a deep green dress that fit just right and gave away the effort she still put into taking care of herself. She smiled warmly at Ellie, then asked if she could steal me for a dance. Ellie raised a brow but gave us her blessing. "Go on, shake what you've got," she said playfully. As Marissa and I walked toward the floor, Ellie grabbed my hand and whispered, "Coincidences like this only happen in movies, Daddy." We danced for a couple of songs, smooth, easy steps with old familiarity, and then wandered out to the bar area just outside the hall. We settled into 2 comfortable chairs near the window and talked for a while, reminiscing about the past and catching up on the years we'd lost. Then Marissa turned toward me, took my hand gently, and looked me straight in the eyes. "Evan, are you still in love with her?" she asked softly. "Because if you are, I don't want to make a fool of myself asking you to dinner." I was caught off guard. I never imagined Marissa would say that, not with her long friendship with Lena. I always thought she was off limits, or at least too close to my ex to consider something romantic. She was lovely, sure. Frank had been a lucky man, and I was surprised no one had snapped her up after he passed. "I'll always have love for her," I said slowly, choosing my words. "Maybe like an old habit, something I used to need. But I'm not in love with her anymore. Not in that way." Marissa studied me for a moment, as if measuring the sincerity behind my words. "I'm not a girl, Evan," she said. "And I've been on my own for 8 years. I don't meet many men I even like, let alone consider dating. So, if one of those rare men is sitting right here, well, I'm not about to pass up the chance." She paused, then added with a wry smile, "And I'm definitely not going to lose sleep wondering what Lena thinks. She let you go, remember? It's been what, 3 years? Besides, I hear you've become the #1 fantasy draft pick on campus. You really should have trademarked yourself." I laughed, feeling warmth rise in my chest. Marissa blushed slightly as she continued. "So if you're not busy sometime soon, maybe we go out. Maybe we don't talk about the past for once." Suddenly, I wanted that. I handed her my phone, and she typed in her number. Just as she handed it back, Sophie and Luke came looking for me. Sophie spotted us first and gave a curious little smile. She knew Marissa, of course, and they exchanged a few words before Marissa patted me on the chest. "You better go do your father of the bride duties," she said. I took her hands, leaned down, and kissed her softly on the lips. "To be continued," I whispered. Marissa smiled and walked away. The rest of the night blurred together, cutting the cake, mingling with guests. But one thing stood out: Lena barely left my side. She was glued to me, shadowing me through photos, toasts, and conversations. I suspected Sophie had mentioned something about Marissa. Maybe it stirred a little jealousy, or maybe it was just nostalgia. Either way, it was hard to miss. Later that night, Sophie approached her mother with a teasing grin. We interrupted Dad and Marissa having a very cozy chat. Pretty sure there was kissing involved. Claire chimed in as well. I saw them dancing earlier. Marissa looked like a high schooler with a crush. It was kinda adorable. Lena didn't find it adorable. The look on her face was tight. As the night wound down and most of the guests trickled out, I made sure everything was squared away. Gifts packed, vendors tipped. Lena and I were the last 2 in the lobby. "I know you took a cab here," I said. "Want a ride home?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Only if I can buy you a drink first. For old times." I agreed. We found a quiet corner in the hotel bar and slid into a low table. When the waitress came, I ordered for us. She'll have a bourbon on the rocks, and I'll stick with Staley. Lena raised her brow, smiling faintly. Nice to know you still remember. You're still the only woman I've ever seen drink whiskey properly, I said. She stared into her glass, then looked at me sharply. So, you planning to have some fun with Marissa Clark? The words slipped out fast, and she immediately put a hand to her cheek, blushing at the outburst. For once, I didn't gloat. I just looked at her quietly and took a sip. I regret that, Lena said quickly, her voice faltering. I didn't mean it that way. I meant, are you going to date her? You've been with so many beautiful women the past few years. It honestly feels like you didn't miss me at all. She paused, then added, was this your plan? Make me jealous while you went off and sowed wild oats. I slowly set my glass down and looked into her eyes, those familiar, ice blue eyes that still glowed under soft lighting. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. I took a breath and carefully shaped my reply. Nice try, Lena, I said quietly. But I seem to recall someone else sowing wild oats while we were still married. You've never explained what made you treat me that way, what I did to deserve that kind of disrespect when I would have been perfectly content growing old with you. She winced slightly, but then suddenly asked, so, is the proposal still off the table? I stared at her, stunned. That was the last thing I expected to hear. She held up a hand, as if trying to wave off her own words. Okay. I made a mistake. A huge one. I was terrified of aging, of becoming invisible. So I threw myself into being desired again, into having sex with younger men who made me feel like I still had it. I told myself it was different, that I deserved it, but it wasn't different. Not really. She looked down at her drink and sighed. It wasn't about love or intimacy. It was just the thrill, the excitement of some 20-something wanting me like I was 22 again. When I compared them to you, it felt like you didn't measure up. You were stable, sweet, reliable, but boring. And I was too wrapped up in the fantasy to realize how good I had it. There was raw honesty in her voice, for once unfiltered. After you left, it stopped being fun. That game I thought I loved? It got old. And so did I. I kept thinking someone would make me feel alive again, but all I really wanted was someone to care after the sex. Someone to hold me. Hell, I would have melted for a real hug. I stayed quiet. Lena took a deep breath. Have you thought about dating someone your age, someone who knows what life actually feels like, even if he can't perform like those guys? You're not the only one getting older, Evan. Neither am I. That's what you're trying to do now? I asked, studying her. She nodded. Yes. I want real again. I want us again. We had 30 good years, didn't we? Can you forgive me? Can we try again? Her eyes filled with tears. A few years ago, I would have wrapped her in my arms without a second thought. Even now, part of me still felt that old urge to protect her, to make her world okay. But something had changed. 3 years ago, this would have felt like a victory. Now it just sounded like regret with nowhere to go. I shook my head slowly. We had 29 good years, Lena, I said. I wouldn't count that last one. I gave her a long, quiet look. But this is real life, not a romance novel. In real life, you don't get the old ending after rewriting the story halfway through. She looked down, defeated. Come on, I said gently. Let's get you home. Marissa Clark brought a soft landing to what had turned out to be a surprisingly decent second bachelorhood. I waited a week after the wedding to call her. We met at a seafood restaurant in a neighboring town, neutral territory. She wore a fitted black dress that turned heads all night, though she didn't seem to notice. Unlike Lena, she wasn't scanning the room for reactions. Her attention was on me, start to finish. After dinner, we drove back to her place for drinks and dessert. She poured us cognac, which we sipped slowly, savoring the warmth and conversation. Then, without a word, she stood up, reached for my hand, and led me upstairs. She brought me into a bedroom that clearly wasn't the master. I didn't need to ask why. I knew. That room still belonged to Frank. Marissa didn't have to ask me to go slow. I already knew. From the way she touched my arm, from the look in her eyes, I could tell this wasn't something she did often, if at all. We started with soft kisses, gentle, unhurried. I helped her out of her dress, kissed her shoulders, her collarbone, the soft swell of her chest. Her body, still so vibrant, seemed to breathe against mine with gratitude and longing. She returned the affection with surprising intensity. As the night deepened, passion replaced tenderness. and when I finally pulled back to look at her face, she could barely whisper a breath. I kissed her again, and we lay tangled together, wrapped in the kind of stillness only intimacy can bring. I watched her sleep. She looked peaceful, beautiful, maybe even radiant. I must have stared at her for 10 minutes before drifting off myself. I'd been with several women since my divorce. All ages, all types. And I'd rediscovered something wild and fulfilling in those experiences. But with Marissa, something was different. Yes, the sex was wonderful. But this felt like more. I started to wonder if I was falling for her as I slipped into the deepest, most restful sleep I'd had in years. The next morning, I woke in an unfamiliar bed, which wasn't unusual these days. But the feeling was. It felt like waking up on a lazy Sunday morning from a decade ago, back when Lena would make breakfast and the girls would run around the kitchen, playing games and laughing. Only now, there was no Lena, no giggling children, just the smell of bacon wafting up from the kitchen and the scent of fresh coffee. I pulled on a t-shirt and some trousers. I couldn't find my shirt. I padded downstairs barefoot, not caring. And then I saw it. Marissa stood at the stove, wearing nothing but my shirt, sleeves rolled up, buttons half done, just enough undone to make my breath hitch. That shirt had never looked better in its life. "Hey, Sonia," I said, teasing. "I see you raided my closet." She smiled over her shoulder. "I hope you don't mind. It smelled like you. I wanted to keep that around a little longer." "Well," I said, stepping forward with a grin. "Can a starving man get some breakfast? Or at least a little attention?" She turned slowly, slid into my arms, and melted into me. She smelled like us. Like last night. Like something I wasn't ready to let go of. And for the first time in a long time. I didn't want to wake up alone. I groaned softly as Marissa leaned against me. She echoed with a smile, nuzzling my chest. We sat down to a simple breakfast and mapped out our Saturday like two people with nowhere to be but with each other. It wasn't about what I had planned or what she wanted to do. It was about us. Every sentence started with "we," and then, in a flash of spontaneous insanity or genius, maybe both, I blurted, "This might sound completely ridiculous, but what if we got married today?" She tilted her head, amused. "You do have an impressive IQ," she said with a grin. "If that's what you want, I'm in." Just like that, it was decided. I knew the local justice of the peace kept Saturday hours. I gave him a quick call, and to my surprise, he had a 4 p.m. slot open. We had a little over 7 hours to clean up, dress up, and pull together a tiny wedding. I needed a best man. Marissa suggested her son, Aaron, 28, sharp, good-hearted. I called him, explained everything, and when I said the bride was his mom, he didn't hesitate. He, his wife, and their toddler hopped in the car to make the hour-long drive. Marissa called her mother, put the phone on speaker, and asked her to be her maid of honor. I'd never spoken to the woman before, but the moment she said yes, through tearful sobs, I knew I'd married into the right family. I called both of my daughters. Sophie and Luke were thrilled. Claire asked if she could bring a +1. Of course, I told her. Then, jokingly, Marissa asked, "Should I invite Lena?" I smiled and shook my head. "Only if you really want to, but I'd rather not turn this into a reminder for her. She's been through enough lately." One of my closest friends owned a nice local restaurant, and when I called to ask if his banquet room was free, he said, "For you?" Of course. I booked it on the spot. Together, Marissa and I sent out a few more last-minute invites to people who mattered, people who knew joy was worth celebrating, no matter how quickly it came. Later, as I was walking out of the jewelry store with our rings, fate threw a surprise at us. Lena, arms full of shopping bags, stepped out of her favorite boutique and nearly collided with Marissa on the sidewalk. They weren't as close as they used to be, but 25 years of history doesn't vanish overnight. They stopped and chatted politely for a few minutes. And then Lena's eyes locked on Marissa's left hand. "Oh my God," she gasped. "Those rings, they're gorgeous." Marissa flushed deep crimson, caught between pride and guilt. Lena's expression shifted, her mind connecting the dots. "Wait, are you married to Evan?" She staggered slightly. Marissa instinctively reached out to steady her. "I didn't know," Lena said, recovering quickly. "I'm sorry. I guess we never talked about it much." "It all happened really fast," Marissa replied gently. "Fast? That doesn't sound like the Evan I knew." Marissa smiled, then added softly, "Have you ever had a moment where everything felt so right that not doing it would have been the bigger mistake?" Then she caught herself, raising a hand to her lips. That came out wrong. I didn't mean. Lena waved it off. It's okay. I get it. I'm the one who let him go. I know I screwed up. Just promise me you won't. Later that week, Lena sat across from her therapist, Dr. Naomi Strauss, her tone sharp and frustrated. They were everywhere, you know, she said bitterly. The minute I left Evan, it felt like the world was filled with eligible, charming, exciting men. Now? Vanished. Poof. Dr. Strauss looked at her thoughtfully. You're a smart woman, Lena. But smart doesn't always mean wise. You were searching in the wrong pool and hoping the shallow end would feel like the deep one. Lena exhaled. I didn't want to talk to them. I wanted to be wanted. But yeah, eventually you realize sex isn't love, and you can't build a life on lust. Real life catches up, the therapist said, and it doesn't negotiate. Fast forward 10 years. I'm standing on the back porch of the cozy 2-bedroom home Marissa and I bought after the wedding. We wanted something ours. Nothing too big, but with space for family dinners and sleepovers. With 6 grandkids and 3 adult kids, that space gets used often. I'm flipping burgers on the grill when Marissa steps outside, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. She hands me mine, and I lean down to kiss her on the lips. She's 63 now, but doesn't look a day over 45. The streaks of gray in her light brown hair give her a soft wisdom. When we dress up for date nights, she still turns heads, and she knows it, even if she never flaunts it. We're older, sure, but not dead. Twice a week, sometimes more if the shower's running, we remind ourselves that passion never has an expiration date. Thank God for science and for her. And you know what? I loved Lena. I really did. But Marissa? Marissa captured something deeper. She became the place I could finally rest. Strange, isn't it? Without Lena's betrayal, I never would have found this life. In a backwards, painful way, I owe her. I see her occasionally. Every few months, we cross paths. She always looks worn out, older than her years. She apologizes a lot, sometimes quietly, sometimes with watery eyes. And while I think it, I never say it. Thank you. At 65, her once show-stopping bosom has begun its inevitable surrender to gravity, and though she wears supportive bras, the illusion is harder to maintain. She's got her cheesecake bum back, but walking through the mall, she's noticed fewer heads turning. The glow is dimmer. One afternoon, she was heading to her car when she spotted me walking toward her. She straightened up quickly, pulling her shoulders back. Hello, beautiful, I said with a warm smile, leaning in to kiss her cheek. She blushed, just like she used to. We chatted for a few minutes, mostly about our shared grandkids. Her eyes flickered with something I recognized but didn't acknowledge. After a pause, I checked my watch. Well, I should get going. I'm really sorry, Evan, she said softly. I looked into her eyes one last time, smiled gently, and nodded. Then I opened my car door, climbed in, and drove away. I never looked back.